All right, so I'm going to look at the letter that people are making reference to, Chomsky, and I guess people are interpreting it as advising him on this whole public scandal. What I find interesting about it is, for me, on the surface of it, just reading into it, it comes across as pretty vague. It comes across as actually more evidence that Chomsky just had some type of interaction on like a surface level of the public persona and things going on, and that Epstein had pursued him or had reached out to him. Just the wording of it, so it says, I've watched the horrible way you're being treated in the press and the public. And so even on that note, he's basically admitting that he's just watching it play out in the public, whatever's on social media, in the media marketplace. And you would think that, so the assumption is that people are trying to suss out whether he had some type of behind the scenes, deeply involved connection, and that he knew all of these other intricacies of the other lives that Epstein was like involved in. But even here, if he had that type of relationship, you would think that his correspondence would amount to more of a sense that there was a connection. It would also seem that Chomsky, knowing he's so involved in all of these research of covert methods within corruption within government, and at this time also knowing that the government and various ones could monitor email, he had to have been aware of all of these types of methods that are weaponized. And so the fact that he just kind of sends out an email knowing, so the idea that people are trying to suss out is, does he know more than he knows? Does he know about this corrupt scandal going on? If he had known, he would seem to have been a lot more protective of his correspondence and the way that he would, engage with it. Whereas he doesn't seem to have that protective sense accompanying the idea that he would just respond to Epstein on his concerns about how to handle this, some of this stuff going on. And so the fact that he just responds without that protective measure seems to assume that he's not involved in some of the other behind the scenes stuff. And if he was, it seems that he would write the letter more in terms of being in the know and being cautious. Maybe something like you'll get through this, or this is like a, I don't know. It just seems like he would write it more as like somebody, if you're kind of gauging the person, like the sense of it, as it would come across as like, we're in the know, let's write this in coded terms because we could be monitored, because we know these questionable things are going on. But he doesn't do any of that. There's not enough self-protection in terms of feeling like there's ulterior motives. He writes it as just more open to his own experience and something that could potentially be leaked out into the public. And so he does write it as though there's assumption that it could be leaked out to the public of his own opinion at the time. And so what he's gauging it as is just the public persona. And so it seems to bring evidence to his relationship with Epstein was basically engaging the public persona and his own experience at the time of, like the public not always giving a fair trial. And so even when he says like, I've watched this, so he's kind of admitting like, I'm just seeing this on the outside. I only know of this on the surface level. I've watched it play out. And he wouldn't say that if he had some kind of intimate behind the scenes knowledge of stuff. So even on that front, it just seems like it's just a surface level public interaction. He doesn't really intimately know all of the other things going on. And he seems to refer to it as his his experience. It's painful to say. So he's kind of just comparing it to his experience so his approach to it is, I've had this experience. This is something that happens in the public, da 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 da. And I just don't really see it as so even this part is interesting, because now people are basically, because this is tied to vulnerabilities tied to Israel, right? And so people are trying to figure out, is he trustworthy? Did he have these connections behind the scenes? And so even this portion where he says, like, how do you prove that you are not a neo-Nazi who wants to kill the Jews? He wouldn't say that, coupled with this, laying out his own experiences. If he hadn't also been accused of that, accused of anti-Semitism, accused of his approach in critiquing the world stage and geopolitical tensions as being anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish, or wanting to get Jews killed. So he's saying that because he seems to have had that accusation against him at such a level where he associates it with like the vultures and different ones in the public. And then you'd have to question, well, then that means that, it kind of gives more evidence to when others would feel suspicious of him because of Israel and whatnot. And him being Jewish, is he trusted in these efforts to challenge the establishment behind the scenes and these covert methods and whatnot? And so then it kind of gives more evidence as to why he would take a diplomatic approach because of such an onslaught of challenge against him as being anti-Jewish or wanting to get Jews killed. And so then it does help you to have more of an understanding as to why he would attempt to take a diplomatic approach, and then the ramifications of taking a diplomatic approach because of all these geopolitical tensions. And so it actually seems more evidence that he's saying there are politicized maneuvers to side with questionable geopolitical tensions, which result in these slanted anti-Semitic viewpoints, even against Jewish people, that are tied to these questionable antics of a public accusation. And so it seems to give more of his perspective and why he was vulnerable to maybe believing Epstein and whatnot. And also seems to portray what he was suspicious of in terms of geopolitical strategy and the difficulty in understanding the credibility of these accusations because of the result of geopolitical gains from the establishment and how these were interpreted. And so it actually seems to prove the point that he is for proper investigation and looking at how any of this is slanted toward geopolitical gains and results. And his vulnerability in trying to strategize it diplomatically to be both, possibly not coming across as anti-Semitic or getting the Jews killed, as this says, or then falsely getting accused of some of these other allegations because of the efforts of challenging the system. And so it seems to just portray that as giving evidence to his experience. And it also comes across as very vague, because if someone feels okay, you've helped me and I'm seeing these other things develop, if he was more inclined to be more excusatory towards Epstein, he could have been more involved in his response, but it almost comes across as a very vague response attributed to his experience and basically just saying, well, kind of just ignore it unless there's actual evidence or something that you need to respond to. And so the letter doesn't seem to be justifying him. It seems to be portraying like, I'm watching this play out, and here's my experience, and here's some things that are susceptible to how this plays out in the longer strategy of critiquing the system, and here's some like vague advice. And so it almost comes across as that he's saying, I'm watching it play out, I'm keeping an eye on how this plays out, and here's some vague like advice. If he had been more involved with him, it wouldn't have been such a vague response. Imagine it from the other side. If someone is really going in, like getting this onslaught of attack on such a massive scale, and somebody responds to you as like, well, I've had this kind of experience in my life, and it's like more about their experience, and then it's like a vague response of how to like avoid some of it if you are innocent. It almost comes across as like Jeffrey would have been like, that's not like, this is like a vague response. It's not very involved in the degree by which I'm being slandered out in the public. It almost comes across as like deflecting connection, I guess you would say, or growing suspicion, actually. Because imagine you're in this seat of like accusation, and it really is like a major onslaught on the world stage, and you reach out to somebody that you feel could give you advice, and they just give you vague advice. It would come across as feeling like you're dodging connection to me because that was just vague, and more about your concern of you and suspicion and the need to continue to watch it play out. It doesn't seem to come across as very intimately involved, nor directly siding with him. I could imagine if someone that I started to wonder about reached out to me, and at that stage when I'm watching it play out and I was wondering about them and I was growing maybe some level of suspicion and questioning my connection, I would probably respond in a vague sense too. You know, like I know you've helped me out before. I want to give you a fair trial, and this is why I'd want to give you a fair trial. But I don't really know much else to say except to kind of like ignore it, but then address it when it's actually like direct accusation or you know, along those lines. I feel like the person reaching out to me would be like, that's so vague, like I feel like you don't trust me at this point. So I don't know, like it just doesn't, to me, like come across as like that he's involved in something more than that, or that he's involved more than just like the public, a public kind of connection and whatnot. I mean, people might say, well, he did get involved in some kind of support that Epstein offered him. But at this stage, it seems like he's kind of backing away. And as he was saying, like, I'm watching it play out. Anyway, I don't know. That's just kind of like some quick 2 cents on this. Even the language of hard to say, but it's the best advice I can think of. When somebody says that, like even in basic language, it seems like he's doubting his connection to him at this point. Because when you say like, it's hard to say, like that sounds like somebody that is saying like, I'm watching this play out, here's some advice. I don't know, man, it's hard to say, but that's like some advice I can give you at this point. It's almost like he's kind of slowly breaking it to him that I kind of have my doubts at this point. We'll have to leave it to the actual legal, like fair process of it. Because I don't know what else to say about this, like the public trial, I suppose. Anyway, that's just some initial thoughts on the letter.